So, lots to get to, and we're going to follow this up with candidates for Niles Village Board and then Niles Ethics Board following that. If you have any questions, there are two women in the back, Mary Alice and my mom, Ellen Rob. Yes, my mom's watching, so anyway. And that reminds me, you know, let's give a big hand for everybody right now. And during the debate, let's keep the cheers and jeers and all the rest of it to a minimum so we can get to more questions. We're going to have an hour and 15 minutes for this. Because we have so many candidates, we're going to do 1 minute answers to each question. If there is a rebuttal, and specifically if somebody's name is invoked, then they'll be allowed a 15-second rebuttal. But in the interest of so many candidates trying to keep moving, if we can keep that to a minimum, it would be appreciated. We're going to start with 1 minute opening statements, and we're going to go in order, starting with Ms. Keene, and then when we get to questions, we're going to start with the second person. They're going to go through and then finish with Ms. Keene, then we'll go to Mr. Ussel, go through, and so forth. So, with that, Ms. Keene, you have a minute for an opening statement.
Do I have to put it green when it's green? Okay.
Yeah, just bring the mic a little closer to you if you need to.
Thank you. Is that good?
No.
No? How about that?
No.
How about that?
Doesn't sound like it's on.
Okay, the button is pushed. It's green.
No.
Thank you. Okay, how about that?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. Do you need the timer? Are you good, Tom?
Yeah, I'll just get it back to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Tom, for getting this set up. My name is Becky Keene. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am currently a trustee of the board. I've been on the board since October of 2020. I have a bachelor's degree in family social services, and I have a master's degree in library and information services, and I'm fluent in Spanish. I've spent the past 20, 25-ish years in my professional and personal life serving families in acts such as attaining citizenship, learning English, learning Spanish, and learning to love learning. Thank you. In my time on the board, I have tried to collaborate with staff and board members. I have fought against the defunding of our library and the lowering of staff. And if elected, my priorities will be to complete a union contract that is beneficial to the library. And my time is up. Thank you. I didn't really have that hand thing.
Thank you. Ms. Bailena. Thank you.
Is it working, microphone? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Irina Bialaya. If you have a problem with my last name, just call me Irina. I think library, in my eyes, is a window to the world, especially American libraries. That was a huge, I wouldn't say surprise, but pleasure to be introduced to American libraries. I was fortunate enough to study and work with the libraries in different countries, science library, university libraries, public libraries. But American libraries is above and beyond everything that I saw. 20 seconds, okay. Especially Niles Public Library. I live in Niles over 30 years, and as immigrant family with kids, we enjoy library. We very grateful for it. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ussel.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Yusel. I'm running for the 2-year term for the Niles Library Trustee position. I've lived in Niles all my life and have consistently attended and used the Niles Library. I found it to be a great resource for books and videos. I've regularly viewed the videos of the Niles Library board meetings many years, and I am familiar with business proceedings of the board. I want to contribute my knowledge of computer systems, programs, and information technology in order to be relevant for the younger generation of patrons, and at the same time maintain the material and formats that our longtime patrons are familiar with. The library needs to be a hub of physical and digital information for everyone, and I believe the independent team that I'm running with will do that job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Movito.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes, okay. Hi everyone, my name is Mike Movito and I am running for a 4-year term on the library board. My wife and I moved to Niles about 2 years ago, right before our son Eli was born. Being so new to the area, the library really became the first place where we found our sense of belonging and connection in this community. It's Eli's favorite place in the world, and I'm actually convinced that he thinks he works there. The Kids Space staff were actually the very first people to meet my son Silas when he was born 6 months ago. It takes a village to raise a child, but my wife and I don't have a village. The library has become our village. They have surrounded us with so much love and care and support. The staff is like an extension of my family, and that's what I'm running to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trunco.
My name is Jason Trunco. I'm running for the 4-year seat as well. As a small business owner, controlling a budget while maximizing every single penny and also valuing your staff is something that I strongly believe in, that we're missing right now at the library. Our seniors have paved the way in our community, and our children are the future. Limiting their ability, the way certain board members have, through the greatest service that Niles has to offer, is just disturbing. We need to give our staff the resources they need to provide the star-level programming our community deserves. If elected, I'll work tirelessly to finalize a contract with the union for both the staff and the library that's fair. I will ensure that programming is not only brought back, but expanded. Let's get our kids, seniors, community back to the library we all love. Let's grow outdoor activities, community involvement, and show our children a library is not only books, but so much more. Let's not settle for mediocrity. Let's achieve greatness, and let's reclaim our library.
Thank you. Mr. Kadir.
Hi, I guess you can't hear me. My name is Umair Abdul Kadir. I am currently a trustee of the library. I was appointed in December 2022 by the Illinois Secretary of State to break a deadlock on the board, represented by two very different ideological factions. My vision, you'll hear that contrast today. My vision for this library is that we will have adequate funding, we will have a complete set of staff, and we will have proper maintenance and a full complement of programming. Without any of those, adding to them or replacing them with electronic services is insufficient. We need to supplement what already exists to make sure that this library stays as a crown jewel of the community. People are watching, the community is watching, the staff is watching. Many people have told me that they're waiting to see what happens after April 4th. So if you want, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCool.
Libraries around the world are going through a fundamental and decade-long decline in borrowings and attendance. Many of the reasons that people are not using libraries in the past, many of the reasons and things people use libraries for in the past are available more conveniently from other sources. Information on Google and YouTube, books from Amazon, and on tablets and phones. Our DVDs are competing with cable channels and streaming with thousands of choices in entertainment and educational content. Currently, borrowings and attendance are less than half of what they were a decade ago. Substantial changes are needed because the library is slowly declining into irrelevance. I recognize and understand this problem. I have the vision, imagination, and common sense to solve it. The library must maintain its traditional materials and at the same time seek out the unique areas where they can serve the needs of the community within our mission statement, to engage, inform, enrich, and educate our patrons. We need to constantly experiment with what works and what doesn't, and move forward in that manner. I'm asking for your vote for re-election, along with your vote for Steve Yusel, Irina Bayala, and Steve Folga, who also understand these problems and are also committed to shaping the library of the future.
Thank you. Mr. Folga.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Steve Folga, and I hope to be part of the new library board. I've been a Niles resident and frequent library user for about 25 years. I have a PhD in gas engineering, and I'm a senior manager engineer at Argonne National Laboratory. My work experience includes extensive project and budget management, and my goals for the library include, number one, increase the public participation in the library as measured by an increase in the number of library card holders and participation in library activities. Number two, enhance the foreign language collection to include all significant and contemporary authors in those languages. Three, increase the electronic collection, add more resources such as Google certification courses for job creation, and ensure sensible spending aligned with the current financial conditions. So thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and talk about this and other issues.
Thank you. Mr. Botello.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roberto Botello. I'm a 21-year resident here in Niles. I'm interested in running for the 2-year term, simply because I say 21-year resident. I have raised 2 children here. I've benefited, and I would hope that our library remains the cornerstone of our community by continuing to provide those services. And as a sitting board member, I hope to vote and follow the laws of the land in order to afford those services to all residents, young and old. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we start the question and answer period. If you have a question, there are 2 women back here, Mary Alice and Marilyn Robb. Yes, she's my mother. Who, if you raise your hands, they'll bring you an index card with, you can write down a question for the candidates. Also, as a reminder, we are streaming this live through Facebook on the Niles Journal Facebook page. So if you want to message your friends and encourage them to watch from home. So we're going to be rotating how we ask questions so that nobody is first or last. So the first question is going to go to Irina. And this is from the audience. What was the last library book you checked out and when?
Well, I decided recently that I'm gonna go, I'm sorry. I decided not long time ago that I'm gonna go through 100 books, recommended, best 100 books, recommended by Guardian. So, and I decided I'm gonna use library books from Niles. So 1984 is the one I just finished. I read it many years ago in Russian. This book was almost impossible to find in Soviet Russia, but I just finished it maybe a couple weeks ago.
Thank you. Mr. Yusel.
It's been quite a while since I've checked out a book from the library, but last DVD that I checked out was history related on the Civil War. I think 2 different cable channel documentaries, and yeah, I guess that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Movito.
I actually just renewed my my borrowing of What My Bones Know, which is a book about complex PTSD and generational trauma. I'm actually reading it on the Libby app, which is really fun to be able to have that just on my phone.
Thank you. Mr. Trunco.
So mine's a little bit of a loaded question, and I'll tell you why. So the most recent book was actually a children's Matt Christopher book for my son. I've shared an author that I grew up reading, and I've shared it with Vinny. He's an avid sports fan, so I actually checked that out for him. But the last book that I've checked out for myself was about a month and a half ago. and I'm reading books right now on South Asian Pacific Islanders, specifically the Samoan tribe, as I've become very interested in that. So that's what I'm going with.
Thank you. Mr. Kadir.
I recently had a conversation with my son about his interest in space and the science of space. So I decided to go back to an old classic, A Brief History of Time by Professor Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
So I'm currently reading that just to refresh myself, so that when my 8-year-old comes to me and says, Daddy, how far away is this galaxy and what does it mean and can we get there and so on and so forth, that I'm able to provide him with intelligent answers to those questions.
Thank you. Mr. McCullough.
The last book I took out was in 2021. I've been recently actually buying my books on Amazon. The library was closed for quite a while during COVID. And I find that when I read a book, I want to keep it and refer to it later on, because I read mostly nonfiction books. So I use them as fact finders.
Thank you. Mr. Foga.
The last book I got was The Adventures of Father Brown. I really like mystery books, and so there's a number of mystery books that I keep pulling out all the time at the library.
Mr. Botello.
Thank you. The book I'm reading currently is Deaf Culture, Exploring Deaf Communities in the United States. The reason for me selecting that book was simply because I'm interested in understanding the different types of communities that we have here in Niles. I am somewhat familiar with deaf communities, but reading this book gave me an updated awareness of some of the changes that are happening within the deaf community. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Keene.
The last book I checked out actually was also for my son. It's an anime collection called One Piece. And there's, I think, 3 different versions in one book. The last book I checked out for myself, was called Tangerine, and I don't remember the author's name, but I chose it because it was on display, one of the displays that the staff had made. And I do have to say I did not love that book and did not finish it, but I will go back and get more. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the next question, we're going to start with Mr. Yusel. And as we said, we're going to be rotating, so nobody's first or last. Some say, and this comes from an online question that was emailed to us earlier. Some say that books and other materials should be chosen by library staff. Others feel that they should be chosen by a committee of community members. What is your stance on this topic and why? What is your position on removing or restricting access to books that community members report as problematic? So, Mr. Yusel.
I think a committee is a good idea. I'm not against it. As far as the current process for selecting books, I think it's okay. There needs to be oversight, which I think is already there. And as far as access to books, I don't believe we should restrict access to books for anybody. On the same note, we do need to be conscious of reading levels and difficulty with different texts. So,
Thank you. And tell me if you, everybody, tell me if you need me to repeat the question. But Mr. Mabito.
The library staff have master's degrees and decades of experience curating collections, and I think we should trust their expertise when it comes to curating the collection. The beauty of public libraries is that each individual person gets to choose what they want to read or not want to read. So I don't think there should be any restrictions on materials in the collection. If you don't want to read a book, just don't read it.
Thank you. Mr. Tronco.
I'm going to sort of second what Mr. Mabito just said. As a library board member, if I'm elected, I know that there's one person sitting up here that has the master's degree for that, to make a decision on that, and that would be Ms. Keene. I would definitely defer to the staff. If it was about cleaning the restrooms or cleaning the building, since I own a professional cleaning service, that's where I would help lend my expertise. Otherwise, we have staff in place for that.
Thank you. Mr. Kadir.
Again, echoing what the last 2 panelists just stated, library staff are trained to deal with problematic issues. They have degrees, this is their field of expertise. I do believe community input is valuable. There is a mechanism by which community input at the moment is taken into account. I believe the library should address the needs of the community and the particular needs of the specific community which it is serving. However, those ultimate decisions should be made by staff.
Mr. McCullough.
Currently, I believe the staff is doing a good job of selecting books. If by some chance somebody wants to see wants to read some additional books, I think the staff should be open to those suggestions, and we should stock them, because we have 200,000 pieces of litter, 200,000 books there in stock. And you know, it's possible some title got through the selection situation, you know, and I think we would want to accommodate everyone in the community in that manner.
All right, Mr. Foga.
I believe in having a public book selection committee because of the fact that if you look at the number of books on the Polish side, you'll see that there's only a limited number of books. If you look at the ones that are Nobel Prize winners, there's like 2 or 3 of them. If you look at the number of books associated with Stephen King, 250, number of books associated with Daniel Steele, 190, and about 2 or 3 on the Polish side. So I think that would be one thing. The other thing is that I would agree with do the work that follows the precepts of the American Library Association. They tell you how to be able to handle book rejection.
Mr. Botello.
Thank you. My position on this is that the system that we currently have is adequate. Our library staff are well skilled on that issue, and the system for our residents and citizens of the community is for them to voice their concerns through directly through a librarian, or come to the library meetings that happen periodically with the board and attendance as a public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Keene.
Yes, I agree with what my running mates have said about, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I agree with what my running mates have said as far as the librarians having the expertise to do that job. They know exactly what they're doing. I can tell you that from personal experience. We are trained very well on how to do that. I have also recently met with the director and the supervisors about our collection development policies and the ways that we handle requests for books to be removed. And I'm very confident in those policies and our staff's capabilities about doing that. Another thing we need to keep in mind here is a strategic plan. That is the way we get input from our community to know what kind of materials they want. Thank you.
Okay.
And we do have more than 2 or 3 Nobel Prize winning books in Polish. Thank you.
And Ms. Paulina.
Well, I think that of course librarian has a lot of knowledge. Also, American Library Association has some recommendations, and I think books should be available, especially because Niles Library is connected to all North Shore libraries. It's very helpful. And even my experience as a reader, I asked a number of times to order the book for me, and they ordered it for me. It was incredible. And availability for everybody is important, and foreign language is important as well.
Thank you. So our next question on our rotating system is going to go to Mr. Movito. The Niles-Maine District Library, as the name implies, is not just the village of Niles. It goes into Maine Township all the way into a little small part of Northfield Township. The Niles Library building is more in the south end of the village, southeast end of the village of Niles. How would you approach serving the Niles library population that is further out geographically?
Thank you, that's a great question. I think it really comes down to first having the staff to do the outreach. I've spoken to a number of staff members who have talked about programs that used to exist to reach the other half of the district, including having programs in D Park, which is in Des Plaines, or in other areas in unincorporated Glenview, or in Northfield Township in the deer love triangle. I think having the staff that can support programs out there to let them know that, hey, this is your library, would be the most helpful.
Great, Mr. Trunco.
I believe that working with a similar situation that you brought up during the Park District debate here was working with other entities in the community. I've reached out specifically to the Niles and the Niles-Maine Park District to see if I am elected, would they be willing to work with outdoor activities, outdoor programming for children, for seniors, to build a green space, to build an area to go read and sit down with a shaded area for seniors. And everybody is so receptive to it. It's an outside the box thinking that we don't focus on enough, that if we do, it'll be great for the whole community. I'm also gonna touch on one more thing. Mr. Fogel sits up here and he continues to say that there's limited amounts of books, despite multiple public comments of over 2,500 books being purchased by the library this year.
Mr. Fogel, please sit down.
Let's just give you that.
No, despite all the public comments, despite the spending that's been FOIA'd and been proven, we continue to hear this misinformation. We have a large number of Polish books in the library. If they would go check out the books, and some of them own a library card, they would find this out.
Okay, now, I'm gonna give Mr. Fogel, because his name was invoked, I'm gonna give him a 15 seconds for a rebuttal, and then, yes, we'll get back to him and back into order to answer the question.
I did a search of the catalog of the Niles, and I handed out the papers associated with it, showing that for the Nobel Prize winners in Polish, that they have on the average around 0 to 10 books at the most. If you do a catalog search, you'll see things such as Jackass Forever listed as a Polish material. That is offensive.
Thank you.
Can others rebut as well?
Yes. 15 seconds.
I would just like to say that the staff, after Mr. Folga's comments were read at the February board meeting, the staff was very disheartened, and they did the research and they came up, and I'm sure they would be happy to take you on a tour of that collection, because what you're saying, I don't know where you got your information from the catalog, is not correct, and the staff will tell you that. And they did tell us at this meeting, this last week. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go on to answer the question now with Mr. Kadir.
As some of you may know, I'm the only current board member who actually lives in unincorporated Maine Township. So I know this problem firsthand. My neighbors, many of them attend the Niles-Maine District Library. Some of them actually attend the Des Plaines Library. I've also served on that board. In some cases, people are closer. If we want this library to be the proper institution, we are going to have to do more outreach.
Okay. Mr. McCullough.
At one time, about 20 years ago or so, we had a branch on Ballard Road, and it's at the edge of Niles. We also had a bookmobile, which they discontinued. In both instances, the attendance was minimal. Initially, when the library was built, it was not the best location for that whole district, but that's where the population was in 1960. And we have to live with it unless we want to spend a lot of money and move the library to, another location.
Thank you. Mr. Fogel, and again, the question was about serving further out areas.
I do agree. I think that a bookmobile would be very helpful. We do need some way of being able to reach those people. So all the ideas that I've heard here, I would entertain them and see whether or not which of those would be the most efficient.
And Mr. Botello.
My suggestion would be to have a dedicated librarian to go out to to the school, elementary schools and middle schools, and support their local library by having the Niles-Maine Library be that resource and that connection. Also delivering books to the library, to the Maine Township area, along with the nursing homes where we have a lot of residents that cannot travel down to the Niles Library.
May I offer a rebuttal to one of the comments?
Sure. 15
Just
seconds.
really quickly, I agree with the bookmobile idea, but if you want to have a bookmobile, you have to have the funding to have it in place.
Thank you. We are back with Ms. Keene.
I think the first thing we would need to do is create a new strategic plan to find out what exactly it is the community needs. We haven't done that in a long time. We need to have outreach librarians, community engagement librarians that can work on those things. We need to go out into areas of the community that we are not serving as much right now because they cannot get to the library physically. So a strategic plan, librarians, and I think the bookmobile might be a possibility. After the COVID pandemic, we have to reassess everything. We don't know what we need right now.
Thank you.
We need a strategic plan. Thank you.
Ms. Balena.
I remember years ago, bookmobile. My mom lived in a senior home and Milwaukee, and they used to come there all the time, and majority of people use it. It was very cool. I also thought maybe create something like a tour for new people who come to live in Niles, or for everybody who haven't been in Niles Library. And this tour will show them ability of the library and service, and they meet people, and hopefully they will come back.
Thank you. Mr. Yusel.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
So the Niles Library District includes a great deal of unincorporated Maine Township, goes all the way into Northfield Township. How do we serve the folks further away from the library itself, which is in kind of the southeast part of the village of Niles?
Thank you. I think we need to have a focus on engagement with the patrons and other residents that use the library. We need to look at the data sheets and the numbers for people coming in versus what's being checked out. Cancel out the duplicity and see where we stand. And just for an example, with one of the digital story times that were streamed on Facebook through the Niles Library, I was the only person watching. So we need more engagement.
Thank you. So the next question, and it comes again from a member of the public. The Secretary of State, the Chief Librarian of the State of Illinois, is spearheading a bill that will allow the Secretary of State's office to deny state grants to public libraries, including those in schools that don't adhere to the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights, which holds that, among other things, that materials should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval, which we kind of touched on earlier, but do you support this bill? And yeah, so we are going to start with Mr. Trunco on this one.
HB, I believe it's 2789, is a bill that I strongly do support. Some of the backers, Senator Laura Murphy, Senator Ram Villaram, they support it as well. We are in a time where everybody's feelings get hurt rather quickly about everything. I'm a father of 4, and if I don't want my kid to read something, I don't let them read it. There comes a point that you have to become a parent again. You have to become a guardian where you put those rules in place for yourself of how you feel. It shouldn't be put on the whole public though. There's a community of many different languages, many different backgrounds. Some may want to read that, some may not. It's not our job to make that decision as a library board. You just said the Illinois Library Association is the one who makes these decisions of what should be and shouldn't be in there. They're the ones, they're the professionals.
Mr. Kadir.
Like Mr. Trunco, I support this bill very strongly. Back when I was a law student, we were taught that you could argue, you were given a piece of information and you should be able to argue both sides of an issue. I challenge anyone out here and any of my fellow panelists to try to argue both sides of an issue if they've only heard one side of the issue. I'm a parent as well, and I can decide what my kids read, but I shouldn't be deciding what other people's kids read.
Mr. McCullough.
I think the only basis for removing books from the shelf is the Illinois statute. There's an Illinois law as far as obscenity, and it deals mostly with obscenity for various levels of age for children. And Other than that, and I'm sure this bill doesn't go against that Illinois obscenity law. So that's what we should be following entirely.
Mr. Folga?
I agree. I think if you look at the American Library Associations, they have very strict procedures of how books should be viewed, whether or not, who should be involved in being able to take out a book from circulation. It's very strict, and so I do agree that it would be a loss of, I think, of knowledge if books are being taken out just from partisan reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Botello?
I stand in support of the bill as it is.
Thank you. Ms. Keene?
I do support the bill. I am very happy and proud to be in a state where we are moving in this direction as opposed to what's happening in other states like Texas and Florida. I am very grateful to Senator Murphy and other people who are supporting things like this, and it makes me even prouder that Senator Murphy is supporting me and my slate mates. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Balena?
I didn't read this bill particular, but I know there is a freedom of speech, and there is information on American Library website, American Library Association website regarding what can be chosen, what cannot be chosen, and I believe in freedom, so hopefully that will work.
Okay. Mr. Usel?
Yeah, the bill would need to be, I guess, looked into a little more on my end, but as long as it's following state law, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. Mr. Movito?
Can I offer a rebuttal on that?
Sure. 15 seconds.
Just add, a bill that is passed by state statute can overrule prior state statute if that is the case. I don't believe that's the case here. But to say that a bill is following state law is not really the bill is state law.
Okay. Mr. Movito?
I absolutely support this bill. As a father, I understand the desire to protect my children and for other parents to protect their children, but I don't think some parents of other children should be able to decide what my children read and vice versa. So I think it should be up to, again, the American Library Association standards.
Okay. So we're going to start the next question with Mr. Kadir. Current library practice is to have all questions from the news media submitted in the form of a Freedom of Information Act request, not allowing direct on-the-record conversations with staff members. Do you support this policy? Why or why not?
Well, the policy is meant to protect library staff members from having to speak directly to the media on the record. Do I believe that media members should be allowed to speak to staff members off the record? As an individual who's using the library, I don't have an issue with that. But I believe that library staff members should not be put in a position to have to state things on the record about the library, which may then make it into print. If they choose to do so, I believe they should have the option to do so, but I don't believe that they should be put in that position where they have to.
Okay, and just for clarification, that includes comments from the director of the library. So, but anyway, Mr. McCooley.
I think, if I recall, that went into effect because various staff members were giving out different facts that were in conflict with each other a few years ago. And I think the library probably needs to have maybe a public information officer that would, if it's the director or not, I'm not sure, that would be able to verify facts or give out information, but we don't have that currently.
Okay, Mr. Folga.
I think that the staff should be allowed to talk off the record with media. On the record, it should be concentrated, maybe those type of remarks made by the library director or somebody who's like a public relations person associated with the library. So at least you have a consistent and format in terms of being able to provide information to the public.
Mr. Botello.
Would you please repeat the question?
So, current library practice is to have all questions from the news media submitted in the form of a Freedom of Information Act request, not allowing direct, on-the-record conversations with staff members, and including the director. Do you support this policy? Why or why not?
Well, I'm in agreement in the sense that questions should go to the spokesperson of the library. When it comes to engaging on an individual basis, I believe that really borders on personal points of view, not necessarily the library's view. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Keene.
Thank you.
Tom, can I add one quick, just rebuttal point?
Quickly.
I don't have an issue if the director were to speak on record. You brought it up.
Okay. Ms. Keene.
Yes, first of all, this is not actually a policy because we never voted on it. This was a directive from the president who bullied her way through to the staff who is now afraid to speak to the media. I do feel there should be one designated spokesperson as we had in the past. It worked beautifully, as Mr. Rob could attest. I think we should stop wasting money on FOIAs for public information.
Thank you. Ms. Balena.
Well, I also agree that spokesperson for the library would be a good idea. And I think director of the library could speak as well. And it's their choice if they want to speak off record or on record.
Mr. Yusel.
Yes, I think there should be some regulation as to what's shared with the media. Things tend to get very contentious and dramatic at these board meetings, and I wish it gets better. I intend for it to get better. But as far as communication with the media needs to be trustworthy for anybody to communicate with. So as far as representing the library, having a designated person to reach out to, I think would be most appropriate.
Mr. Movito.
As a marketing director, I think this policy or this directive would need to be revisited so that the staff doesn't live in fear of ever having a conversation with someone who works for any media organization. I agree with the recommendation that there should be a spokesperson, a designated spokesperson that can speak directly with media professionals, and the director of the library should also be able to speak directly with library professionals.
Thank you. Mr. Trumbo.
Ms. Keene hit it on the head. There was a policy, there was a person in place before that was able to communicate with yourself, Tom, and other media outlets. We should get back to that. The fact that the president of the board, along with Mr. McCullough, continue to spend countless money on lawyer fees. Lawyer fees are the second highest budget line item on our budget behind staff salaries. They talk about they want to give back to the community. They talk about they want to give money back. If we stopped wasting money on things like FOIAs and lawyer fees because we don't understand basic concepts of being on a board, that would help and go a long way.
Thank you.
I want to rebut that.
All right, 15 seconds.
I have only spoken to Mr. Walsh, our lawyer, I think 2 times in the last year, and each time was less than 5 minutes. So I'm not responsible for lawyers' fees.
Okay. Quickly.
He may not say that he's responsible for lawyer fees, yet a judge found that he was responsible for lawyer fees for a frivolous lawsuit against one of his own board members.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, Mr. McCullough?
That's in the court process right now, and that's not, hasn't been finalized. And that's,
Yes, it has.
that involves $250 in court costs. We have insurance that's covering that.
That the taxpayers pay for,
No,
not
the
out of your
taxpayers,
pocket.
no, it's all insured.
Do the taxpayers pay for the
The
insurance, Mr.
insurance,
McCullough?
yeah, it hasn't
Okay,
changed
thank
our
you.
rate. It hasn't changed our rate.
Yet.
Okay.
But yet it's another thing that's tied up in court. You've lost 3 lawsuits to 3 people on this board because you use your personal attorney during public meetings, which should be FOIAble, but you and Carolyn refuse to cooperate with FOIA requests.
Mr.
You know,
Trunco,
Mr. Trunco, you're attacking me. 2 years ago, you couldn't be in this building because you were banned from the Park District. I don't know why you're running for this election. We have much better quality people in this village.
Mr. McCullough, 2
Okay,
years
okay,
ago,
okay.
you asked for the public to give
Okay.
you a chance at a July 2021 meeting where the mayor himself stood in front of you along with a group of citizens that were so upset. You asked for 2 years to show what your budget could do. Well, let's face what your budget did. It's destroying the greatest asset we have in our community. It's destroying our community, and you don't care because you and your friend, Mr. Newsgat, rather harp on things from 20 years ago than harp on what the facts are, that you're destroying this community.
Order. All right, we gotta move on. We gotta move on.
The library is running fine.
We gotta
It's a
move
star
on.
library. It's not destroyed.
We gotta move on to the next question.
It's a fantasy.
Yes, you are.
We gotta move on. We're running out of time. Now, the next question does go to Mr. McCullough, just in order. How would you approach negotiations with the Niles-Maine District Library Employee Union, which is negotiating their first contract with the library now?
At present, we have an experienced labor attorney that's doing the negotiating, and she's keeping us advised in executive session where the situation, what situation exists and what's the areas that are being negotiated. This is executive session information, and I can't divulge any of that at this time. But it is moving along.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Fuller.
I don't have personal experience in this, but my wife does, and so her lawyer handles these types of affairs. I would leave it to legal advice.
Okay, Mr. Patello.
Thank you. Currently, there are, the two sides are bargaining for that. There is a contract negotiations happening. The role of the trustees is simply to approve a budget. So once their contract is settled, then it would be the responsibility of the trustees to create a budget to meet those expenses.
Thank you. Ms. King.
Can you repeat the question?
How would you approach negotiations with the Niles-Maine District Library Employee Union, which is negotiating their first contract with the library now?
Thank you. I would approach it as we are currently doing by having monthly meetings with our lawyer. That was dragged out all fall, unfortunately, but now that we are actually moving along, I feel much better about reaching a contract that is beneficial to both the library itself and the staff as well. It's very important for them to be able to defend themselves in light of what has been going on with the ban on hiring lately. So I am very interested in making sure that the contract that we do end up agreeing on works for both sides.
Thank you. Ms. Byline.
Well, I don't have knowledge about this, so when I will become a board member, then I can get deeper into it.
Thank you. Mr. Ussel.
Yeah, I would have to share the same line of thought as Arena. Once I get elected, I will have a better understanding of it, but I think what the current process, I think it's going well.
Okay, Mr. Mavito.
I would advocate for a fair and equitable contract to be reached, expeditiously. I know that the staff have been, waiting for a contract to be reached for quite a long time, and I would advocate for the best-in-class benefits and salary and policies that benefit the library and the staff, because we want people to want to work here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trunco.
Our staff is severely overworked and underpaid. They've been under constant heavy battering from some of the current board members, where they are working 2 and some of them even a 3rd job. I've heard of a librarian working a 3rd job just to provide basic needs and basic functions for their family. Nobody should have to work 2 or 3 jobs to put groceries on their table for their family. I would be in heavy support to get this done immediately. I've had multiple conversations with leaders of AFSCME as we've been endorsed by them, and I would definitely say let's get something done for our librarians and for our library as a whole.
Okay, Mr. Kadir.
As Mr. McCool said, we've been addressing this issue in executive session, and I can't talk about the details. However, I want to say a couple of things. Number one, if we want to have the best staff and the top staff at this library, we have to pay them and provide them with benefits that are in accordance with what the top of the line individuals make in surrounding libraries. Otherwise, they're going to be going somewhere else. Number two, we do have an excellent attorney who's handling these negotiations. That attorney was hamstrung by the board until a deadlock was broken and things started moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, our next question.
Rebuttal, actually.
Sure.
Quick rebuttal. I would just like to say that for whichever of us end up being on the board, that you please come prepared to do union negotiations. You may not be on the board yet and know how things are going, but you need to be prepared before you get that far. Thank you.
Okay. This next question comes from somebody in the audience. Lately, quite a bit of material, which they consider inappropriate, falls within the hands of children. Where is the parents' input in all these decisions? And we addressed this a little bit earlier, but just if you want to give a quick answer, we're going to start with Mr. Folga.
I'm a father of 2 children, and I made it a point of making sure what my children were reading or watching, that I was aware of that, to make sure it was not inappropriate or offensive. So it is the parents' responsibility to make sure that their children grow up, without being able to see offensive, pornographic, and other types of materials. Within the library board structure, I would say that the American Library Association provides enough information that will be able to help us identify what should be taken out of circulation.
Thank you. Mr. Botello.
So I welcome all material at the library. As a parent, I supervise and monitor what my children view. I do give them some guidance in terms of what's appropriate within our household. But by all means, all material should be welcome in the libraries that we have for people to sort through. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Keene.
Yes, I think that parental input is very important and always easy to do with our library. You can always talk to a librarian about your concerns. They are very willing to work with us. There is a button on our website that you can press for things that you want to have added to the collection, as well as, I'm not sure if that button works in the reverse where you can ask for something to be removed, but you can always talk to the staff about it. You can email board members. We're very open and receptive to those kinds of things. And most importantly, your children are your children. You need to stay with them when you're in the library and supervise what they're doing if you are concerned about what they might see.
Thank you. Ms. Byline.
I agree with you 100% on that. But also there is an American Library Association website, like a recommendation, and we should have some kind of rules established based on that.
Mr. Usel.
Yeah, I think we covered this before, but yeah, everyone should have access to literature, and we need to follow state law. So,
thank you. Mr. Mavito.
My family uses the kids space in the library every single day. And I can tell you with full confidence that the kids space staff do a fantastic job of providing recommendations to children that are always age appropriate. But my wife and I, we have final sign off on any books that we check out for our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Trunco.
I addressed this earlier, that my children, I monitor what they do all the way up to my 14-year-old. I still look at hers. But I will say that our community and our country has evolved from being strictly about one type of book and one type of situation. We need to realize that there are biracial families. We do need to realize that there's an LGBTQ community that deserves to have books in there so that everybody could learn. Not everybody has a mom and a dad. Some people have a mom and a mom, and it's okay, and they shouldn't have to be frowned upon just because somebody doesn't want their kid reading a book.
Thank you. Mr. Kadir.
I'm going to echo what a number of people have said before me. The ALA guidelines are important. However, we have librarians who understand those guidelines and who are best equipped to implement those guidelines. I'm a parent as well. I ultimately get the final say over what my kids read, and I feel that if I have a concern that I can bring that to a librarian, and I can trust that that librarian is going to be cognizant of and accommodating of those concerns if I have any particular concerns. Again, if you want to bring your kids to the library, you got to watch your kids.
Thank you. Mr. McCool?
Could you repeat the question? It's been twisted around a little bit here.
Lately, quite a bit of materials which is inappropriate falls into the hands of children. Where are the parents' input in all of these decisions? And again, we kind of addressed this earlier.
There is a form, I think it's, the exact words are request for reconsideration of library material. It's a form that should be, I believe, at all libraries. And you fill out the form and it ends its way up with the staff and the director, and they determine whether the material is obscene or not for that level of age group, and that's the proper procedure and the legal procedure to go through.
Thank you. Who did we start with on that question? I'm sorry. Okay, we'll start with Mrs. All right, so now the next question is going to go to Mr. Botello. The library had a hiring freeze, which has since been lifted, in place for about 19 months. What is the ideal number of full-time equivalent staff for the library?
Well, I don't have a specific number on hand right now. It would be dependent upon the services that we're offering. Clearly, there's a need for our library to continue to provide services, and I'm in the position that our library needs to increase those services. So if it means that we increase by X%, that's what it's gonna be. Those decisions should be made by the professional staff that we have on board, considering the programs that are gonna be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Keene?
Thank you. We did have 102 library staff a couple of years ago. We have lost over 30, I think maybe 38 staff members. We're down 37% on our staff. After a pandemic and after the changes we've gone through in the last 2 years, I don't feel that I know what that number will be. I think that is something we have to work on gradually with our director and our supervisors. I do know there is a resource for us called Standards for Illinois Public Libraries, which is where we get how we figure out those things. It tells us how many full-time employees we should have for how many hours a week we are open. And that is a very good resource that all trustees should be using to figure these kinds of things out. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bellini?
Well, I look at some publicly available information, and unfortunately, Niles Library has the lowest number of registered users. It's only 26.7%. The highest was Arlington Heights Library, 69.2%. And we have the highest cost per user, $403, where, let's say again, Arlington Heights, $263, Park Ridge, $245. So we have a lot to think about, how to make it work, how to invite more people so amount of staff will be justified.
Thank you. Mr. Yusel?
Yes, that's a number that is unclear at this time, but other factors need to be included with making a decision on that as a board. Like Arena had said, we need to figure out a way to increase the users, the amount of users that we have, the card holders. If there's a way to double that, we need to sit down and talk about it and figure out how to get that done. If it correlates with the amount of employees that are available, that's yet to be seen.
Thank you. Mr. Movito?
Just a couple weeks ago, the KidSpace staff had 5 staff members all out sick at the same time. There weren't even enough people to staff the desk. So staffing levels are definitely not optimal. They're barely functioning. So I think it would need to be increased. And when you have increased staff, then you can have increased programming and services, which would then increase the number of patrons that would be coming into the library.
Mr. Tronco?
That's just it. You have to have programming. You have to have an investment into your library first to talk about patron usage. Of course, patron usage is down right now when you're limiting the amount of staff and the amount of programs that you have. If you go ahead and put some more programming in there and you're able to hire some more staff, and then you start seeing the increase. a lot of times you have to put the cart before, you can't put the cart before the horse here. And that's what unfortunately has gone on. You know, I've said it before, the library is a service to our community. Services unfortunately don't make money for you, they do cost money. If Niles Public Works ran out of salt in January and we had a snowstorm in February, should they not purchase more salt to salt the streets?
Thank you. Mr. Kadir.
So I've actually addressed this issue with the library director after we helped to lift the hiring freeze back in December. She mentioned that the ALA recommendations that Ms. Keene mentioned, we are something like 20 or 25 people below that bare minimum level that we need to be to satisfy the ALA recommendations. I don't have an exact number in mind, but I did get information from supervisors as to how many people that they feel that they are essentially short. And I've mentioned those numbers, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I have mentioned them in a board meeting saying we need this many people in this space and this many people in this space. And then I would like to reevaluate that after those minimum numbers have been filled.
Thank you. Mr. McCullough.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes. The library had a hiring freeze in place for about 19 months. What is the ideal number of full-time equivalent staff for the library? Full-time equivalent meaning if you have one person who works 40 hours or you have two people,
37 and a half.
20 each, that's equal to one. So, yes.
Well, I don't know what that number is, but one of our problems is we have inflexibility. We have actually about 6 active service desks, yet we have at the same time 30 people working in the library. So we just have too many people working in the back offices when we have patrons that might need help on the floor, or if we have sick people, we don't have somebody to replace them because we don't have people that either don't want or don't want to be cross-trained in different areas. So we also probably need to do a staffing study, which has never been done there, to see exactly where we should be staffed and what levels.
I'd like to rebut.
Okay.
Mr. McCullough has consistently said that we do not need more staff, and I'm quite sure that he would be very happy if the hiring ban was still in effect. The fact of the matter is, if you ask the staff who are still there that we are lucky enough to still have, they would completely disagree. And there aren't enough staff in the back or front. Thank you.
Thank you. And then you wanted to rebut, both of you wanted to rebut.
Yes.
Mr. Movito had his hand up first.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to rebut that as well. The staff are already cross-trained, but there's also some issues with somebody who typically works in one area of the library and then is expected to perform all of the functions of someone who is an expert in another area of the library. They need more staff to be able to actually function optimally.
Thank you. And then Mr. Trumko, and then we'll get to Mr.
Yeah, as recently as just 2 board meetings ago, one of the trustees said that we could just stop putting books away and focus on just the front end alone. Well, if we don't recirculate the books, how can they get taken out again? How can we just take somebody who's putting books away and shelving our books and just tell them all of a sudden to be a children's librarian and run a story time? That's impossible. It's like making a plumber do an electrician's job.
Thank you. Mr. McCullough, you had a rebuttal.
Yes, like I said, most of the staff, the help that people need is finding a book. It's not something that we need a NASA scientist or somebody with a master's degree for. It's mostly finding a book, and that's simple enough. A lot of the people that are putting the books back on shelves are capable of finding the books also.
One more time.
Have a rebuttal. Mr. Kadir hasn't rebutted yet, but then we've really got to move on to the next question.
So
we're running out of time.
So very quickly, I went in the library a few weeks ago with my daughter, maybe it was a month ago, looking for a book. The librarian basically walked me to the exact point and said, here, and handed my daughter 3 different options. If we don't have the adequate number of people who know how to do that, we're not fully staffed.
All right, Mr. Folga, did you answer this question yet?
No, I have not.
Okay.
The ideal number of people would be determined by what we're going to be looking for in the future for the library, which includes increasing the electronic collection. If you look at we have the lowest amount of expenditures per person our library on electronic, but that's what the young kids nowadays want to have. My daughters try to get some books, and they're unable to get that. So the future is the librarians will be purveyors of knowledge. They will not be taking books. They will
Thank
be
you.
answering questions.
We're running out of time. I want to try and get one more question in. Sure. We're almost out of time. Did you already answer this question, Mr.? Okay, that's what you said. So now we're going to start the final question here with Ms. Keene. The library's collection of books and programming is the library's collection of books and programming in other languages adequate? If not, how should this be addressed, or is this an issue of concern to you?
I think that I can't say that I know in detail the numbers of books we have and in which languages. I am confident in our librarians' abilities to do their collection development responsibilities. I think that if we had more staff, we could do an audit on what we have at the moment, and if that is matching the populations in our community. I do know that we have a lot more books in Polish than has been reported by some of the candidates up here, as has been refuted by our staff. So I'm confident that we are at a good place, but of course we always need to be reevaluating. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Belena is somebody who reads books in Russian.
Yes, well, I read book in English most of the time now, but I personally think that Russian collection is pretty good. I also look at other libraries. I not always look at Niles libraries, but all members of the libraries. But again, it would be nice to review, and community can express their opinion, because there are a lot of languages in this community. And I'm sure that people would love to have more recent books. Let's say, except classics, there are some new books that not necessarily on the shelf. So it requires a lot of reading and different opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Usel.
Yeah, I believe there is always room for more books and more literature. So I think what we have right now is acceptable, and we need to be open to requests from the public for foreign language books that they may be seeking but they can't find.
Mr. Movito.
I'll just share two stories. A few months ago, I met a Ukrainian mother who had come here from Kyiv, escaping the war, and she was so excited. She had a 3-year-old son with her in the kids' space. She was so excited that they had books, picture books, board books that her son could read, so books in other languages, and that was just so validating for her. Secondly, Miss Rosie in the kids' space handpicked a Filipino book that was actually a modern retelling of a Filipino folktale that my dad used to tell me as a kid. The collection's extensive.
Thank you. Mr. Tronco.
The library has a wide array of foreign language books. Do I think that we have enough? I don't think you can ever have enough in a particular area, considering the growing community that we have. The Assyrian population, the Hindu population, the Filipino population, it's all exploding around us and moving into Niles and using our services. So should we evaluate consistently on a constant basis? Absolutely. Should we increase this? Yes. My sister just had twins a month ago, and she's teaching them Italian as well as English at the same time as they're going to grow up. It's important to have the bilingual for everybody going forward.
Mr. Kadir.
As somebody who speaks a second language, has studied a third language as well, I agree with Mr. Trunco that it's hard to ever say that there's enough. So there's a finite amount of resources that we have to allocate, and so we have to evaluate whether those resources are being allocated properly. Going back to a comment that was made earlier about ebooks are great, but if there are ebooks and no physical books, then that's going to be a detriment to the community. So if we have proper funding, we can do both.
Thank you. Mr. Makula.
I know percentage-wise, in relation to the percentage of the community that reads and speaks in a foreign language, we don't have enough percentage of foreign books, because I think we have less than 10,000, yet our total collection is 210,000 books. So it would need to be examined exactly what languages and what titles that people would be interested in seeing. I think maybe we need to you know, go to these various communities and find out, you know, what they're looking for. And that could also be the reason that if somebody comes, let's say, for a Korean book and we only have 500 of them, and they don't come back.
Okay,
Rebut,
thank you.
rebut.
Ms. Keen?
Thank you. I just would like to point out what a marked difference this is from 2 years ago when Mr. McCullough said we shouldn't buy any more books in other languages and that people should assimilate.
That's not what I said.
Yes, it is.
I said we should encourage people to learn English and have the instruction in the library so that they can have a second language also and be fluent. If you're dealing in a society that all transactions mostly occur in English and your neighbors speak English, I think it'd be beneficial that
Thank you.
the library would help people with this. That was the idea. I never said anything about it.
Mr. Trunco, did you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, the fact that if we don't have a book, Mr. McCullough makes it sound like we can't get that book. We partner with other libraries and have that book sent to us within a couple of days. And if it's requested and approved, we can have that book purchased and then put into our collection as well. But that's how you build your library.
I believe we're to Mr. Foga now.
The latest census information shows around 56% of our population speaks a second language. I'm one of them. And so one of the problems I've run into, my wife has run into, is we come into the library and there's no contemporary books in Polish. And so it's frustrating. A lot of the books that when our children were growing up, we wanted books from Nobel Prize winners in Polish to give to them. It wasn't available. So as Joe was saying, we have a very limited number of books given the total amount of population that we have. If half the people speak a different language, let's take care of it.
Thank you. Mr. Kadir, you want to rebut?
Yeah, librarian, after Dr. Folga made his comments at a public meeting a couple of months ago, librarians actually researched this issue and found that his comments were not accurate.
I'd like to rebut that. If I would say go into the catalog of the library and you'll see something like Jackass Forever is listed as a Polish reading material. Library Doom, the movie Doom, is listed as a Polish reading material. Tell me how that's possible.
Okay. Mr. Botello.
Thank you. I believe that languages should continue to be increased within the library. What a better example would you want than to have someone feel welcome in the library when you go in there and you see a language that is yours or you're familiar with. So I believe that we increase the spoken languages as well as some of the languages that I'm sensitive about, which is Braille and deafness, as well as visually impaired folks. Thank you.
Just one last comment to rebut. I would invite Dr. Folga to go with the librarian and just check out the collection and we can resolve this issue very quickly.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Please give a big hand for all our library candidates. Stick around. At noon, we are going to have